So what is ethical social media use? It's quite hard to define until we understand some of the more contentious areas of social media. For example, what happens to our data? Why are social media platforms free? How is our data being stored? I spoke with one of our leading scholars in this area of connective communication, Dr. Fiona Martin from the University of Sydney, to find out more.
Some of the issues that are associated with social media research are exactly the same as your classical research problems. That is, we have to consider how we treat our participants with respect and with dignity and with justice. And we also have to consider their privacy and, I suppose, their autonomy as research subjects and their safety. But I think the difficulty with social media ethics is that there are so many actors involved in the network of research participants. So it's not just the users of the social media platform, it's also the platform providers and the internet service providers. It might be the users' friends, it might be incidental people who happen to join a discussion on a particular topic. And then you've got any marketing companies who are trying to manipulate the way in which that interaction takes place, or at least intervene in some way. You've also got the people who are surveilling those interactions, and that might be not only marketing and advertising companies, but also, for example, governments. So there are a whole lot of different factors, networked relationships, and also the ways in which we're kind of trying to intervene in social media environments that might impact the ethics of the situation. I think it's that complexity that is really what we need to think about. It's hard to make a generalisation about whether people who use social media are aware that they might be being monitored or that their activities might be being researched. I think some people are very aware, and certainly the studies that have been done of people's attitudes to terms and services on Facebook, for example, suggest that some people are really aware that Facebook does research on them and that it allows third parties, like marketing companies, to conduct research, or at least to look at the data that people are creating in their social media interactions. But day to day, when we're just talking with our friends, do we actually know or think about the fact that we might be researched? I don't think so. I think a lot of people engage with everyday chat with their friends and their family and don't think for a moment that their messages or the sorts of activities they're engaged in might be put under the microscope. It's not in the interests of social media companies to make us aware that we're always being monitored, right? They are interested in us going about our everyday interactions in a normal, naturalistic way because they want to know what triggers our emotions, our activities, our relationships, and they don't want us to be constantly aware that what we do is being researched. And it's a bit naive in a way, but because the social media platforms have set up this interesting relationship with us, it's a contra deal, really. They provide us publication benefits and the software that enables us to maintain our social relations, and we are the product. We give them data. I think the classic example of people not being aware of social media research is the Facebook contagion study, where Facebook tried to see whether people would respond to emotional manipulation. So they changed the content of people's feeds to be more negative, to contain more negative posts, more negative news feed material and so on, to see whether how people responded. And surprise, surprise, they responded in kind. They responded more negatively to negative material, if you like, and more positively to positive material. Now, they published this study just as they do with all of their studies, quite openly, and didn't think that this was a major problem because they had internalised the contractual terms of the Facebook terms of service. If you're trying as a user to think through how someone might study you on, say, Instagram, just think about whether, first of all, whether the service has what we call a public API, an application programming interface. And that means that it can feed data, that interface can feed data to researchers, research companies, marketing companies, anyone who wants to study that data. So most of the major social media platforms have something like an application programming interface, an API. They may not make that material publicly available. Then again, they may give it to developers, say, so that they can make apps that then offer you services for which you're going to pay. They make it available to market research companies so that they can better target ads at you and your tastes and what you talk about every day. They might give it to governments who request information about different types of groups. For example, if you are a member of a fundamentalist Islamic group that talks about the IS, Islamic State. Now this is really interesting because if someone's studying Islamic State supporters on Instagram or Facebook, they can also be studying everyone who associates with those people. And that could sweep up your friends or your family accidentally. Is it safe to use social media? It's about as safe as other parts of everyday life. The interesting thing is whether people know how to protect themselves when they're using social media. So whether they understand the terms and services that they're actually signing up for, whether they know how to protect their identity, whether they know how to keep themselves safe from unwanted attention. So are there privacy controls that they can use? That's all the sort of stuff that I think we really should be teaching people more. So less about cyberbullying and more about how to keep yourself safe in these really quite exciting but potentially difficult social environments.
So ethical social media is not only about what we do on social media and what others do with our data, it's also about the consequences that are associated with this communicative activity. And more to the point, there may be a distributed responsibility that within the current social media environment suggests we need to take more control over what data we share and where that data might end up. But in having said all that, it's difficult for everyday users to be aware of the complexity of the social media environment and is something not all users are or can be. So I'd argue that the responsibility of ethical social media rests with the social media producer, to some extent, to ensure that any sort of campaign they may operationalise contains an element of thoughtfulness in the sorts of associated activities of social media.